June 15th, 1963, 6:47 in the evening. Dad was sharpening his tools on the old grindstone behind the garage, sparks flying like tiny orange stars in the fading light. That's when he said the words that would haunt me for the next 6 decades. I can still hear the screech of metal against stone, still see his calloused hands guiding that chisel with the patience of a man who'd learned that good things take time. "Listen to me, son," he said without looking up. "There's going to come a day when you think you're smarter than everyone who came before you. When that day comes, remember this. Wisdom isn't about knowing everything. It's about knowing what you don't know." I was 18, college-bound, full of fire and ambition, and the absolute certainty that comes with youth. I thought he was talking about school, about books, about the kind of learning that happens in classrooms. I had no idea he was trying to save me from myself. I rolled my eyes. Actually rolled my eyes at the man who'd worked double shifts at the Ford plant just to keep food on our table. The man who'd missed his own birthday dinners to fix our neighbors' cars for free. The man who'd never owned a new shirt in his life, but somehow found money for my college textbooks. "Sure, Dad," I said, that teenage smirk spreading across my face. "I'll remember." But I didn't remember. Not when it mattered. Not when my pride started making decisions my heart should have made. Not when I began treating people like stepping stones instead of human beings. Not when I confused arrogance with confidence and cruelty with strength. By 25, I was everything my father wasn't. Sharp suits, corner office, company car with leather seats that smelled like success. I made more money in a month than Dad made in 6. I lived in a downtown apartment with floor-to-ceiling windows and a view of the city skyline. I dated women with college degrees and trust funds. I belonged to the right clubs, ate at the right restaurants, knew all the right people, and I was miserable. Completely, utterly miserable. But I was too proud to admit it, too proud to call home and say the words that were choking me. "You were right, Dad. I don't know what I'm doing." Instead, I built walls, thick ones, made of success and sophistication, and the kind of cold intelligence that cuts people down instead of lifting them up. I became the guy who corrected people's grammar in meetings, who made jokes at other people's expense, who never admitted a mistake because admitting mistakes was weakness, and weakness was death in the corporate jungle I'd chosen to inhabit. My first marriage lasted 18 months. Sarah was a good woman, kind heart, gentle spirit, the type who baked cookies for new neighbors and remembered everyone's birthday. She loved me despite my edges, thought she could soften them with patience and understanding. She was wrong. I remember the night she left. We'd been fighting about my job again, about the hours I worked, about the man I was becoming. "You're not the person I fell in love with," she said, standing in our bedroom doorway with her suitcase in one hand and tears streaming down her face. "You're turning into someone cold, someone mean, Someone who thinks being right is more important than being kind. I should have begged her to stay, should have admitted she was right, that I was losing myself in the pursuit of being better than everyone else. Should have called my father and asked him how to find my way back to the man he'd raised. Instead, I watched her leave, watched the best thing in my life walk out the door because my pride wouldn't let me bend, wouldn't let me be vulnerable, wouldn't let me say the 3 words that might have saved everything. I need help. The second marriage followed the same pattern. Different woman, same ending. Jennifer was tougher than Sarah, more willing to fight fire with fire. We spent 3 years tearing each other apart with words designed to wound, competing instead of complementating, keeping score instead of keeping faith. She gave as good as she got, but nobody wins when love becomes a battlefield. The divorce was brutal, not because we had much to fight over, but because neither of us could stand the thought of losing. We spent more on lawyers than we'd spent on our wedding, turned what had once been love into something ugly and vindictive, made each other pay for the crime of not being perfect. My father tried to reach out during those dark days. He'd call on Sunday evenings, his voice careful and concerned. "How you holding up, son?" he'd ask. "Need anything? Want to come home for a while, get your feet under you?" I always said no, always insisted I was fine, that I had everything under control. But the truth was spiraling away from me like water down a drain. I was drinking too much, sleeping too little, making enemies faster than I was making money, burning bridges I might someday need to cross again. The worst part wasn't the loneliness, though that was crushing. The worst part wasn't the shame, though that ate at me like acid. The worst part was the growing realization that my father had seen this coming, had tried to warn me, had offered me a different path when I was young enough to take it. I almost didn't tell this part, but something tells me you're the kind of person who stays. By 35, I was running my own consulting firm. On paper, I was everything I dreamed of becoming. In reality, I was a man who traded his soul for success and was just beginning to understand what a bad deal I'd made. I had employees who feared me, clients who respected my results but couldn't stand my methods, a bank account that should have made me happy and somehow left me feeling emptier than ever. I specialized in corporate restructuring, came in when companies were failing, cut the fat, made the hard decisions nobody else wanted to make. I was good at it because I'd learned to see people as numbers on a spreadsheet instead of human beings with families and dreams and fears. I could fire 100 people before lunch and sleep like a baby that night because I'd convinced myself that efficiency was virtue and sentiment was weakness. But efficiency without compassion is just cruelty in a business suit, and I was wearing the finest suits money could buy. The breaking point came on a Tuesday in October. I was 42. We were restructuring a small manufacturing company outside Toledo, family-owned for 3 generations. The old man who'd built it from nothing was still coming in every day at 78, same age I am now. still believing he could save what his grandfather had started. His son worked beside him. His granddaughter kept the books. It was exactly the kind of operation my father would have understood and respected, and I was about to destroy it. The math was simple. They were hemorrhaging money, hemorrhaging jobs, hemorrhaging hope. The smart play was to shut it down, sell the equipment, walk away with whatever we could salvage. That's what I recommended to the board. That's what my cold, efficient, profit-driven analysis said we should do. But when I looked at that old man's face as I delivered my verdict, I saw my father, saw the same weathered hands, the same quiet dignity, the same belief that hard work and honest dealing would somehow be enough. Saw the same trust in his eyes that I'd betrayed in my own father's. That night I drove to the nearest bar and got drunk. Falling down, can't see straight, wake up in your car drunk. And sometime between the fourth whiskey and the moment I passed out, I called my father. Don't remember much of what I said, but I remember crying. Remember admitting that I was lost. Remember asking if it was too late to come home. He drove 6 hours through the night to get to me. Found me in that parking lot at dawn, still drunk, still broken, still his son despite everything I'd done to prove I didn't need him. He didn't say, "I told you so." Didn't lecture me about pride or choices or consequences. Just helped me into his truck and drove me to a diner, bought me coffee and eggs, and sat there while I tried to piece together how I'd gotten so far from the man he'd raised me to be. "Dad," I said when I could finally speak without my voice shaking, "I think I've been doing everything wrong." He stirred his coffee slowly, the same patient way he used to sharpen his tools. "Son," he said, "wrong's just another word for learning. Question is, what are you planning to learn from this?" That was 23 years ago. It took me another decade to fully understand what he'd been trying to teach me all along. That wisdom isn't about being the smartest person in the room. It's about being the most teachable. It's about admitting when you don't know something. It's about asking for help when you need it. It's about treating people with kindness, even when kindness doesn't pay dividends. It's about building others up instead of tearing them down. It's about understanding that being right isn't worth being alone. I didn't become perfect overnight. Still haven't become perfect, probably never will. But I started trying to become the kind of man my father had always believed I could be. The kind who uses his strength to protect instead of to punish, who sees success as an opportunity to lift others up instead of a platform to look down from, who understands that the measure of a life isn't what you accumulate, but what you contribute. I changed everything, left the consulting firm, started teaching business ethics at the community college. Spent my 40s learning how to apologize, how to listen, how to love without keeping score. Met my third wife at a church potluck when I was 47. Helen was a widow with 2 teenage kids and a heart big enough to give a broken man like me another chance. We've been married 28 years now, built something real together, something my father would be proud of. She never met him, but she understands him through the stories I tell, understands that everything good in me came from that man who sharpened his tools by hand and believed in doing things the right way, even when the right way was harder. My stepchildren call me Grandpa now, have kids of their own who climb on my lap and ask me to tell them stories about the old days. I tell them about their great-grandfather they never met, about the man who worked with his hands and loved with his whole heart, about the lessons he tried to teach me when I was too young and too proud to listen. If any of this sounds familiar, subscribe. I've been carrying stories like this my whole life, and I'm not done talking. My father died 15 years ago. Massive heart attack while he was working in his garden, surrounded by the tomatoes and roses he'd tended with the same care he'd tried to tend me with. I got the call on a Thursday afternoon. Dropped everything and drove through the night, but I was too late. Too late to hold his hand. Too late to thank him for never giving up on me. Too late to tell him that everything he'd tried to teach me had finally taken root. But maybe it's never really too late. Maybe every time I choose kindness over cruelty, patience over pride, humility over arrogance, I'm having that conversation with him. Maybe every time I help someone instead of stepping on them, I'm proving that his lessons didn't fall on deaf ears forever. Maybe the best way to honor a man who believed in second chances is to keep giving them to yourself and others. I'm 78 now, same age he was when he died. I look in the mirror and see his face looking back at me. Same blue eyes, same stubborn chin, same hands that are finally learning to build instead of tear down. I understand now what he was trying to tell me that evening by the grindstone. He wasn't warning me about school or books or the kind of knowledge you find in textbooks. He was warning me about the most dangerous knowledge of all, the knowledge that makes you think you're better than other people, the knowledge that closes your heart instead of opening it, the knowledge that builds walls instead of bridges. He knew that intelligence without wisdom is just a sharper knife to cut yourself with, that success without compassion is just a higher cliff to fall from, that being right without being kind is just another way of being wrong. If I could go back to that evening in 1963, I'd put down my teenage arrogance and pick up that chisel. I'd work beside him in comfortable silence, learning the patience that comes from doing things right instead of doing things fast. I'd ask him questions instead of pretending I had all the answers. I'd listen with my heart instead of my ego. I'd understand that the man sharpening tools in his backyard knew more about life than all my professors combined. But I can't go back. None of us can. All we can do is stop ignoring the people who love us enough to tell us hard truths. Stop pretending we're too sophisticated for simple wisdom. Stop trading our humanity for success that tastes like ashes in our mouths. My father was right about everything, about pride, about wisdom, about the danger of thinking you know more than you do. It just took me 60 years to stop being too stubborn to admit it. Don't make my mistake. When someone who loves you tries to share their wisdom, listen. When your parents call, answer. When your heart tells you you're headed down the wrong path, change direction before it's too late. Because the hardest lesson in life isn't learning something new. It's unlearning everything you thought you knew in order to become who you were meant to be. And sometimes that takes a lifetime. Sometimes it takes losing everything to realize what you had. Sometimes it takes becoming an old man to finally understand what your father was trying to tell you when you were young.